My dad kicked me out for saving Grandma's paintings. I never thought my life would pivot around a bunch of old canvases splattered with red paint. But then again, I never thought I'd be kicked out of my childhood home at 19 either. Growing up in Des Moines, Iowa means you learn to value practicality. My dad, an auto mechanic, the kind with perpetually oil-stained fingernails who believes college is for people afraid of honest work. Mom works as a receptionist at the same clinic she's been at since I was born. We're not poor, but we're definitely the kind of family that checks the price of everything twice. So when my grandma Judy lived with us for those last 5 years, she stuck out like a peacock at Chicken Farm. Grandma wasn't your typical Midwestern grandmother. No cookie baking or gentle knitting for her. Instead, she converted our garage into what Dad called her crazy studio. She'd blast Elvis records, not the mainstream hits, but the weird B-sides no one remembers, while painting these wild, abstract canvases. Most featured these aggressive red swirls that looked like tornadoes made of blood, all while wearing this ridiculous faded hat with a feather that was probably fashionable when Kennedy was president. The family consensus? Grandma had gone senile in an artistic way. More garage sale junk, Dad would mutter whenever she proudly showed off a new creation. Mom would just smile tightly and say something noncommittal like, "That's nice, Judy," before changing the subject to something practical like the weather forecast or grocery prices. My brother Mark, the golden child who'd scored a management position at Walmart right out of high school, was even worse. He'd smirk and later tell me, "Looks like someone let a 5-year-old loose with ketchup." Then he'd laugh like he'd said something profound. I never defended her. That's what eats at me now. I just nodded along, trying to be one of the adults. Sometimes I'd even join in with a joke about her modern art phase when friends came over. What kind of garbage grandson does that make me? When Grandma died last month from a stroke, it hit me harder than I expected. Not just because I'd lost her, but because I realized I'd never really taken the time to know her. Never asked about her art or why those red swirls meant so much to her. Just dismissed it all as the eccentric hobby of an old lady who'd lost her marbles. The day after the modest funeral, practical, just like everything else in our family. We all gathered to clean out her room. Mom was sorting through clothes for Goodwill. Mark was checking if any of her jewelry was actually worth something. Dad was grumbling about having to take a day off work for this. And there they were, stacks of canvases leaning against the wall. At least 30 paintings, mostly those abstract red swirls, but also some landscapes and a few portraits I'd never seen before. One caught my eye, a red vortex that seemed to be pulling everything into its center. I remembered it from when I was maybe 7 or 8. I'd stared at it for what felt like hours, seeing different shapes in it each time. "What are we doing with these?" Mom asked, gesturing at the paintings. Dad barely looked up. "Trash." "Could donate them," Mom suggested half-heartedly. Mark snorted. "Who'd want this crap?" "Maybe Alex can sell them for $1 each at some flea market, since he's so set on that art history degree instead of real work." That was another constant source of family tension. My decision to study art history at community college instead of taking the assistant manager job Mark had lined up for me at Walmart. Dad thought I was throwing my life away on useless knowledge. Mom worried about student loans. Mark just thought I was trying to be special. As they continued sorting through Grandma's more valuable possessions, I watched Mark carelessly toss painting after painting into a pile by the door, the designated trash area. Something in me snapped. Not violently, but quietly, like a resolution crystallizing. I waited until everyone was distracted. Dad found some old tools in Grandma's closet, finally something he considered valuable. Mom was cataloging Grandma's modest collection of costume jewelry. Mark was checking sports scores on his phone. Quietly, I gathered about 15 of the paintings, as many as I could carry, and slipped out to my car, a beat-up 2005 Chevy Impala that I bought with 3 summers of lawn mowing money. I stashed them in the trunk, making sure to include that red vortex that had fascinated me as a kid. Later that evening, after everyone had gone to sleep, I snuck back outside. I couldn't stop thinking about the rest of Grandma's paintings tossed carelessly by the trash cans at the end of our driveway, waiting for tomorrow's garbage pickup. It felt so disrespectful, like throwing away pieces of her soul. So I grabbed my flashlight and quietly retrieved every last canvas from the bins. Some had dirt on them. Others were slightly bent from being crammed in with the household trash. It took 3 trips to rescue them all, but by midnight, my car's backseat and trunk were filled with Grandma Judy's entire collection. Throwing away her art felt like erasing her existence, and I couldn't let that happen. I told myself I was just saving them from the landfill. Maybe I'd hang one in my dorm room as a memory of Grandma. The rest I could donate somewhere. Someone might appreciate them, even if my family couldn't. That night, staring at my ceiling, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about Grandma in that ridiculous feathered hat, dancing to Elvis while creating those red swirls. Was there meaning behind them? Or was she just having fun? I realized I'd never know, because I'd never bothered to ask. On impulse, I went through the paintings in my trunk. The red vortex one was special to me. I couldn't bring myself to part with it. But there was another painting, a swirling composition of blues and greens that reminded me of a storm. That seemed like a good candidate. I took some photos of it and decided to try selling it on eBay, just to see if anyone else might value what my family dismissed. I listed it for $20, enough to cover shipping and maybe a pizza. I wrote a description. Abstract storm painting by elderly Midwestern artist. Oil on canvas. Approximately 16 by 20 inches. I didn't expect what happened next. 2 days later, over breakfast, Dad's face turned a dangerous shade of purple as he thrust his phone in my face. What the hell is this? There on his screen was my eBay listing. Somehow, he'd stumbled across it. The auction hadn't received any bids yet, but Dad was furious nonetheless. You stole your grandmother's paintings? Mom looked more disappointed than angry, which was somehow worse. I didn't steal them. You were throwing them away. I protested. They weren't yours to take. Dad's voice had that dangerous, quiet tone that was worse than yelling. And now you're trying to profit off your dead grandmother. Mark, naturally, piled on. You're embarrassing the whole family. What if someone we know sees this? What's embarrassing about it? Someone might appreciate her work. I argued, gesturing at the listing on Dad's phone. Those people would be idiots. Dad snapped. Nobody pays real money for that garbage. The argument escalated. Words were said that can't be taken back. Dad called my art history studies pretentious nonsense. I called them all Philistines who wouldn't recognize art if it slapped them in the face. Mom cried. Mark suggested I needed therapy. It ended with Dad pointing to the door. If you're so smart about art and think we're all just stupid working class hicks, then maybe you should figure out life on your own. Fine, I had replied, with the kind of bravado that only comes from having no real plan. I will. Mom tried to intervene, but Dad was beyond reasoning. He stomped upstairs and returned with my duffel bag, already hastily packed with some of my clothes. He threw it onto the porch and slammed the door after I walked out. So there I was, in a dingy Super 8 motel on the outskirts of Des Moines, paid for with what remained of my last financial aid disbursement. The stack of Grandma's paintings leaned against the wall. The eBay listing sat at $20 with no bids yet. I wasn't sure if I should even complete the sale if someone did bid. What if the buyer wanted to know more about the artist? What if there was something about these paintings I didn't understand? I kept staring at the red vortex painting in the harsh motel lighting. I was glad I didn't sell this one. Something told me to keep it close. There was something almost hypnotic about it. The way the brushstrokes created movement. The subtle variations in the shades of red. Was Grandma Judy actually talented? Had we all missed something important about her? The more I looked at her work, the more I wondered what other secrets might be hidden in these colorful canvases. Maybe I really was crazy, like Dad said, throwing away a home and family over some old paintings. But what if Grandma left me something more than just splatters on canvas? What if these paintings were trying to tell me something that nobody in my practical, Walmart managing family ever bothered to hear? I traced my finger along the edge of the red vortex, feeling the texture of the dried paint. Tomorrow I'd have to figure out what to do next, whether to crawl back home and apologize, or somehow make it on my own. But that night, in that cheap motel room with its cigarette-scented carpet, I couldn't shake the feeling that Grandma's trash might be the most valuable inheritance anyone in our family received. And maybe, just maybe, these paintings were the first step to figuring out who I really was. The next 3 months of my life were a crash course in adult poverty. Turns out, an art history major with 1 semester completed and 0 real-world experience doesn't exactly have employers lining up at the door. My first week after motel funds ran out, I slept in my car in the Walmart parking lot. Ironically, the one where my brother was management. I kept the paintings carefully wrapped in old blankets and trunk, checking on them obsessively like they were abandoned puppies I'd rescued. Eventually, I landed a job slinging pizzas at Domino's. The manager took pity on me after I told him a sanitized version of my situation. Family disagreement. I called it, which is a Midwestern way of saying, my dad thinks I'm a worthless disappointment and kicked me out. The pay was barely enough to cover a room in a dilapidated shared house near campus. My bedroom was actually a converted sun porch with a leaky ceiling and windows that whistle when the wind blew, which in Iowa is pretty much always. My roommates were 2 engineering students who spent most of their time in the lab, and a cryptic guy named Darren, who I'm pretty sure was running some kind of drop-shipping business out of his bedroom. We weren't friends, but they weren't jerks either, which was all I could hope for. Every night after delivering pizzas until 2 a.m., smelling like pepperoni and exhaustion, I'd unwrap one of Grandma's paintings and just look at it. I'd prop it up against the wall while I ate cold pizza crusts, studying the brushstrokes in the dim light of a cheap IKEA floor lamp I'd rescued from someone's curb. One particularly depressing Tuesday, after getting stiffed on tips all night in the pouring rain, I started a TikTok account out of sheer boredom and loneliness. I held up the red vortex painting that had started this whole mess and recorded myself. So, this is the painting that got me disowned. I said to the camera, my eccentric grandma's art that my family called trash, but I thought was worth saving. Now I deliver pizzas, live in what's basically a glorified garden shed, and have meaningful conversations with this swirly red thing, because it's the only one who understands me. I ended with a self-deprecating, don't let your art history dreams send you to pizza purgatory like me, kids, and posted it, expecting maybe 5 views, all from bots selling questionable supplements. 2 days later, I checked the app during my lunch break and nearly choked on my free employee pizza. My video had 10,000 views. The comments section was blowing up. That painting is actually fire, though. Your grandma had skills. Getting major abstract expressionist vibes. Is that a lost Rothko or something? But one comment stood out among the thousands. This looks eerily like a lost Jackson Pollock. The movement, the energy, the precise shade of red. I studied his work for years, and this has the same essence. More pics, please. This commenter had a verified account with PhD in their bio. I didn't know much about Pollock beyond the basics from my intro to art history class. Famous abstract expressionist, the splatter paint guy, alcoholic, died young in a car crash. But I knew enough to realize the comment was probably hyperbole. Still, that night I filmed another quick video, showing a few more Grandma's pieces and giving a condensed version of my family drama. I went to bed in my freezing sun porch bedroom and dreamed of red paint dripping from the leaky ceiling. I woke up to my phone, having a seizure with notifications. The second video had gone viral, over 500,000 views in 8 hours. I had gained 30,000 followers overnight. People were tagging art museums, galleries, auction houses, and even celebrities who collected art. Show us more. Your grandma was a genius. What's her name? Why haven't we heard of her? These could be worth serious cash. Don't sell them cheap. My roommate Darren, who had never spoken more than 10 words to me, suddenly appeared at my door. Dude, you're trending on TikTok. I knew those weird paintings would be good for something. You should monetize this ASAP. I spent my entire shift at Domino's in a daze, nearly delivering a Hawaiian pizza to the wrong house, because I couldn't stop thinking about what was happening. Was this just internet hype, or could Grandma Judy's art actually be valuable? That evening, I received a direct message on TikTok that made my hand shake so badly I dropped my phone right into my sad bowl of microwave ramen. My name is Thomas Bloomberg, senior art critic for the New American and occasional appraiser on PBS's Antiques Roadshow. Those paintings you've been sharing appear to have significant artistic merit and possibly historical value. Would you be willing to send one for preliminary examination? Expenses covered, of course. My first thought was, scam. This had to be someone trying to trick me into sending them the paintings so they could steal them. I'd seen enough true crime documentaries to know how these things worked. But a quick Google search showed that Thomas Bloomberg was indeed a real person, a respected art critic with credentials longer than my student loan application. His profile photo matched the official headshots on reputable websites. Still skeptical, I messaged back asking for verification, and he promptly sent a photo of himself holding a handwritten note with my TikTok handle. After several exchanges, I reluctantly agreed to send one painting, not the red vortex one, which I still felt strangely protective of, but a smaller blue and green piece that reminded me of stormy waves. I packaged it carefully in cardboard and bubble wrap I'd salvaged from Domino's Recycling. The $15 for shipping was almost a day's worth of tips, but I figured it was worth the gamble. As I handed the package to the postal worker, a middle-aged woman with tired eyes, I felt a strange mix of hope and betrayal. What if Grandma's painting never came back? What if this Bloomberg guy stole it or damaged it? What if this whole thing was an elaborate prank? That's a weird-shaped pizza, the postal worker joked, clearly recognizing my Domino's uniform. It's art, I replied, feeling pretentious even saying it. My grandmother's. She raised an eyebrow. Special delivery for Grandma. Huh? That'll be $15.42. I handed over the money. There went dinner for the next 2 days. For the next week, I obsessively checked my phone for messages from Bloomberg while delivering pizzas in the increasingly bitter Iowa winter. My roommates, now aware of my potential art fortune, as Darren called it, suddenly wanted to hang out. The TikTok account continued to grow, reaching 100,000 followers. People sent fan art of the red vortex painting. Some college kid in California even got a tattoo of it. It was surreal. A month ago, I was a family disappointment. Now strangers on the internet were calling my grandmother a forgotten master and visionary genius. I didn't know what to believe. My parents hadn't reached out, but I knew they must have heard something. Des Moines wasn't that big, and several local people had recognized me from the videos. Mark, my Walmart manager brother, had sent one text. Mom's upset. Dad says you're making a fool of yourself on the internet now. I hadn't replied. On a particularly cold Friday evening, as I was defrosting my car windows before my delivery shift, my phone rang with an unknown New York number. My heart nearly stopped. Hello, is this Alex? The voice was cultured, with that specific East Coast inflection that makes everyone from the Midwest feel instantly provincial. Yes, this is he. I answered, trying to sound more educated than I felt. Thomas Bloomberg here. I've completed my initial examination of your grandmother's painting. There was a pause that felt like it lasted 3 Iowa winters. Young man, I don't quite know how to tell you this, but this painting exhibits extraordinary technical skill and artistic innovation. The brushwork, the compositional balance, the emotional resonance. It's all there. Your grandmother was hiding a remarkable talent. I leaned against my freezing car, suddenly unable to stand properly. Are you serious? Entirely. I've shown it to several colleagues who specialize in mid-century American abstract expressionism, and they're equally impressed. We'd like to see more of her work, and I've taken the liberty of involving a reputable auction house to provide a preliminary valuation. A valuation? My voice cracked embarrassingly. Yes, based on this single piece, and assuming the others are of similar quality, we're looking at significant value. This particular painting, which you so charmingly sent wrapped in pizza box cardboard, is conservatively worth between $12,000 and $15,000. The world tilted sideways. $15,000? For one painting? That was more than I made in a year at Domino's. That was enough to pay for several semesters of college. That was life-changing. Bloomberg continued talking about provenance, documentation, and an exhibition he wanted to organize, but I could barely process his words. My ears were ringing like I'd been standing next to the pizza oven all day. I need to sit down, I mumbled into the phone. Bloomberg chuckled. I understand completely. It's overwhelming. Listen, I'm sending you a certified check for $15,000 for this first painting. Consider it an advance against future sales. We'll need to establish your grandmother's identity in the art world properly, document her work, and build interest before bringing the major pieces to auction. This could take some time, but it will be worth it. I somehow managed to finish the call without hyperventilating. Bloomberg promised to courier the check overnight and asked me to start documenting all the paintings I had, photographing them properly, and measuring them. The next afternoon, a FedEx envelope arrived. Inside was a check for $15,000 made out to me, along with a contract giving Bloomberg first right refusal on future sales, but guaranteeing I retained ownership of all pieces until explicitly sold. I sat on my sagging cot in my leaky sun porch, holding the check in trembling hands, staring at all those zeros. The paintings leaned against the wall, Grandma Judy's red vortexes, and blue storms and green explosions, suddenly looking less like the ramblings of an eccentric old woman, and more like a work of someone who understood something profound about life in color and emotion. Was this real? Or was I about to be the victim of the most elaborate scam ever perpetrated on a desperate pizza delivery guy from Iowa? What if the check bounced? What if Bloomberg was just setting me up for some kind of art heist? What if this was all some kind of bizarre reality TV show prank? But what if it wasn't? What if Grandma Judy really was a secret artistic genius? What if these paintings really were my ticket out of pizza purgatory? I ran my fingers over the check, feeling the slight texture of the paper, the raised ink. It looked legitimate. Bloomberg was legitimate. This could all be legitimate. This could be my one true shot at a different life. A life where I wasn't just a family disappointment. A life where Grandma's art was valued, where her vision was recognized. Or it could be just another false hope, another cruel joke from a universe that seemed determined to make me question every decision I'd ever made. I stared at the red vortex painting, the one I'd refused to send away, the one that had started it all. What do you think, Grandma? I whispered, is this our big break, or am I being played for a fool again? The painting, of course, didn't answer. But as the winter sunlight caught the textured surface of the red paint, it seemed to pulse with a life of its own, as if Grandma Judy had somehow captured her heartbeat in those swirls of crimson. I folded the check and tucked it into my wallet, still unsure whether to believe in this sudden turn of fortune. Was this a genuine chance, or just another trick to make me believe in myself again? The check didn't bounce. I stood at the bank counter, my heart pounding as the teller processed it, half expecting alarms to sound or security guards to tackle me for attempted fraud. But instead, she just smiled and asked if I wanted funds in my checking account. $15,000. A fortune to someone whose last bank balance had been $47.83. That day, I quit Domino's, not dramatically, but with genuine thanks to the manager who'd given me a chance when I needed it most. He understood, even wished me luck with what he called my art inheritance situation. I promised him free pizza for life if I ever made it big. What happened next still feels like a blur of surreal moments strung together, like one of those paper chains we made in elementary school. Bloomberg's article hit the New Yorker's website 3 weeks after he received Grandma's painting. The title alone made me choke up. Judy Harper, America's overlooked abstract expressionist genius. The article included professional photographs of the painting I'd sent, alongside expert analysis of her technique, comparisons to known masters like Pollock and Rothko, and speculation about why such a talent had remained undiscovered. The last paragraph mentioned me, her grandson who had rescued these masterpieces from obscurity and perhaps the garbage bin. Bloomberg had been kind enough to send me the draft for approval, and I'd asked him not to mention the family drama. Some things are better left private, even in the age of social media oversharing. My TikTok exploded overnight, from 100,000 followers to over 1 million in less than 48 hours. The hashtag Grandma's Art started trending globally. People shared stories of their own grandparents' underappreciated talents. Art teachers used my videos in their classes. A famous tattoo artist in L.A. got thousands of requests for the red vortex design. I moved out of the sun porch room that same week, thanking my roommates with a case of expensive beer I'd never been able to afford before. Darren, ever the entrepreneur, asked if I needed a social media manager. I declined politely, but sent him some business his way later when I could. Bloomberg arranged for me to rent a climate-controlled storage space of the paintings and hired a professional to properly document, photograph, and catalog each piece. There were 47 in total, a modest body of work by prolific artist standards, but substantial for someone who had painted in secret, dismissed by her family. The offers started coming in after Bloomberg arranged a private viewing for select collectors and gallery owners. The first sale beyond the initial painting was for $65,000, a smaller piece with interlocking green and blue shapes that reminded me of the Iowa countryside scene from above. The buyer was a tech executive from Seattle who collected emerging artists. I remember staring at the receipt, wondering what Grandma would think of someone paying more for one of her paintings than she'd probably earned in several years of her working life. Would she be proud? Amused? Bewildered? I wished I'd asked her about her art when I had the chance. Now all I had were the paintings themselves, silent witnesses to her hidden talents. The money went straight into a separate account my newly hired financial advisor had set up. Don't go crazy spending, she'd advised. This could be just the beginning, or it could be a flash in the pan. Art markets are unpredictable. 2 months after Bloomberg's article, I found myself in a Macy's dressing room, sweating profusely while trying on suits for my first major interview. CNN wanted to feature me and Grandma's art in a segment about undiscovered American talents. The saleswoman, sensing my panic, eventually took pity on me. "Honey, you look like you're shopping for your own funeral," she observed, helping me pick something that didn't scream former pizza delivery guy way out of his depth. She settled on a navy blue suit that was simple but classic. "Just be yourself," she advised while ringing up the purchase. Everyone loves stories about regular people stumbling into extraordinary situations. I wasn't sure I was stumbling anymore, more like being catapulted. The day after buying the suit, I received news that Emma Winters' art consultant had reached out to Bloomberg. The actress, known for her eclectic taste in art, wanted to see Grandma's work. Specifically, she was interested in the red vortex painting, the one I kept back from all sales, the one that had started everything. The meeting took place in a private gallery in Manhattan. I flew in from Iowa, my new suit carefully hung in a garment bag. The red vortex painting transported by specialist art handlers Bloomberg had insisted on hiring. The gallery owner, a woman with architectural glasses and a perpetual expression of refined skepticism, had cleared her afternoon schedule for this viewing. Emma Barrymore was nothing like I expected. No Hollywood entourage, no sunglasses indoors, no demanding assistant. Just a woman with a genuine enthusiasm for art and a warmth that immediately put me at ease. She asked thoughtful questions about Grandma, listened attentively to my fumbling explanations of how I'd saved the paintings, and spent a long time simply looking at the red vortex. "It's extraordinary," she finally said. "There's an emotional intelligence in this piece that you rarely see. Your grandmother wasn't just talented, she understood something fundamental about human experience." I nodded, pretending I completely grasped what she meant, while my Midwestern imposter syndrome screamed at maximum volume. She offered $230,000 for the red vortex painting, an amount so large it didn't feel real, like Monopoly money or the fake checks they give lottery winners for photo ops. But more than the money, it was her plan for the painting that gave me pause. "I want to loan it to the Museum of Modern Art for their upcoming exhibition on overlooked female artists," she explained. "Your grandmother deserves to be seen, to be recognized. This isn't just for my private collection. This is about establishing her place in art history." I hesitated. The red vortex had become something of a talisman for me. The painting that had changed everything. The one piece of Grandma I'd fought hardest to keep. Seeing my reluctance, Drew suggested I take time to consider the offer. "Art is emotional," she said, "especially when it's connected to family. Think about what your grandmother would want." That night in my hotel room, I stared at the red vortex propped against the wall. What would Grandma want? She'd painted these pieces for decades with no recognition, no support from her family, no expectation they'd ever hang in galleries or museums. Had she painted for herself alone? Or had some part of her longed for recognition? I thought about my own journey, from family disappointment to sudden art world sensation, about how the paintings had given me a second chance. Maybe they could do the same for Grandma's legacy. The next morning, I accepted Drew's offer with one condition: that the painting's museum label would prominently feature Judy Harper's name, not mine or Drew's. The painting sold, and 3 months later hung in the Museum of Modern Art alongside works by other female artists who had battled obscurity during their lifetimes. By the 1-year anniversary of my motel room crisis, Grandma's remaining paintings had sold for amounts that still seemed unreal to me. The last and largest piece, a sprawling canvas with intersecting lines of deep burgundy and gold, won a Japanese tech billionaire for $1.2 million at a Sotheby's auction. Bloomberg helped me navigate the bewildering world of high-end art sales, taking a modest commission that he more than earned. With his guidance, I established the Judy Harper Foundation with a portion of the proceeds, dedicated to supporting elderly artists and community art programs in small Midwestern towns like the one where Grandma had lived and created in isolation. But the foundation wasn't enough. I wanted to do more, to create something lasting that would honor Grandma's legacy and help other overlooked artists. Using the largest chunk of money I'd set aside, I opened a gallery in New York's Chelsea district called Forgotten Frames. Our mission: to discover and promote artists who had been overlooked, particularly elderly artists whose work had never received proper recognition. The gallery opening drew an impressive crowd: art critics, collectors, celebrities, and even a few curious TikTok followers who tracked my journey from the beginning. Bloomberg gave a moving speech about Judy Harper's unique vision and technical brilliance. A curator from MOMA discussed the importance of expanding the art historical canon to include overlooked voices. And at the center of it all hung a high-quality reproduction of the red vortex painting, the original now in MoMA's contemporary collection, with a plaque telling Grandma's story. The gallery quickly became known for discovering remarkable talent in unexpected places. We feature a retired postal worker from Oregon whose miniature sculptures have been collecting dust in his garage, an 80-year-old former janitor whose celestial-inspired paintings transformed everyday cleaning supplies into cosmic visions, a Vietnam veteran who processes PTSD through intricate wooden carvings. Each show channeled a portion of profits back into art education programs for veterans and rural communities. Places like Des Moines, Iowa, where access to art was limited and creative talent often went unrecognized. As the gallery thrived and Grandma's reputation grew in the art world, unexpected messages began appearing in my inbox. First, it was distant relatives I barely knew, suddenly remembering our special bond, and wondering if I might help their aspiring artist children. Then former classmates, neighborhood acquaintances, and even my high school art teacher, who had once told me I had limited creative potential. Most surprising was my brother Mark's Instagram post, a throwback photo of Grandma Judy in her studio, paint splatter hat askew, with the caption, "Always knew there was something special about Grandma's art. So proud of my brother Alex Harper for showing the world her talent. Hashtag family legacy, hashtag proud brother." I nearly threw my phone across the room. Mark, who had tossed her paintings in the trash and mocked me for saving them, now acting like he'd been Grandma's biggest supporter all along. My parents were more direct. My father left a voicemail awkwardly congratulating me on doing well with those paintings and suggesting we catch up sometime. My mother began sending texts with increasing frequency, sharing family photos I'd never seen before, some featuring Grandma in her younger years, and mentioning how they'd redecorated the living room. I responded politely but briefly to my mother. I ignored my father entirely. The hurt was still too raw, the memory of that duffel bag thrown onto the porch too vivid. Then came the Facebook comments on news articles about Forgotten Frames and the Judy Harper Foundation. My mother, so proud of our son Alex and his amazing gallery. Judy's artistic talent runs in the family. My father, that's my boy, always had an eye for quality. Like father, like son. The revisionist family history made me sick to my stomach. Where was this pride when I was sleeping in my car? Where was this support when they were calling Grandma's art garbage. When the invitation to speak at the Museum of Modern Art for a special event honoring overlooked female artists arrived, I hesitated before checking the +1 box. Who would I bring? For all my newfound success and connections, I made few real friends in the art world. Most people seemed interested in Grandma's story or what I could do for their careers, not in me as a person. I considered bringing Bloomberg, but he was already attending as a panelist. Drew was filming a movie in New Zealand. My college classmates from that one semester of art history felt like they belonged to another lifetime. In a moment of either weakness or grace, I still haven't decided which. I sent my mother a text asking if she'd like to attend. Her immediate, enthusiastic acceptance made me queasy with mixed emotions. The day before the MOMA event, I returned to my hotel room after a long day at the gallery to find a thick cream envelope that had been slipped under my door. Inside was a handwritten letter on expensive stationery, the kind my parents would have once mocked as pretentious. Dear Alex, we know an apology cannot undo the past year. Nothing can erase the hurtful things we said or how we failed to support you when you needed us most. Your mother tells me you've invited her to your museum event, and I hope that means there's a chance for us to make amends. The truth is we were wrong. Wrong about Judy's art, wrong about your dreams, wrong to throw you out over something so petty. Your success has forced us to confront our own narrow-mindedness. We're proud of what you've accomplished, though we have no right to claim any part in it. If you're willing, we'd like to meet while you're in town, perhaps after your event with your mother. No expectations, no pressure, just a chance to apologize in person, and perhaps begin rebuilding what we destroyed. Dad. I read the letter 3 times, my emotions cycling through anger, vindication, suspicion, and finally, uncertainty. After everything that had happened, the dismissal of Grandma's talent, the mockery of my art history dreams, the physical act of throwing me out, now they wanted back in my life. But was it me they wanted back, or access to the successful gallery owner I'd become? Did they miss their son, or did they simply want to bask in the reflected glow of my unlikely triumph? Would they have reached out if Bloomberg had declared Grandma's paintings worthless if I was still delivering pizzas in Des Moines? I placed the letter on the hotel desk and stared at it, thinking about second chances and forgiveness, about Grandma creating beauty in a house full of people who couldn't see it, about how her paintings had given me a new life, one with purpose and meaning beyond anything I could have imagined that night in the Super 8 motel. Was I ready to offer my parents the same redemption that Grandma's art had given me? Or was this just another moment where they'd managed to make me feel small, to remind me that I was still just a kid from Iowa playing dress-up in the art world? I picked up the letter again, the weight of it in my hands, representing everything I'd fought to overcome, everything I'd achieved, and everything I still risked losing. They wanted back into my life, but were they reaching for me or for my money? The night of the MOMA event was surreal. I stood at a podium in front of art world elites, academics, and journalists, speaking about a woman who'd been dismissed as eccentric for most of her life. Mom sat in the front row, dressed in a new outfit I'd never seen before, nodding enthusiastically at everything I said. The disconnect was jarring, like watching someone play a role in a movie about my life, rather than actually living it. Afterward, she hugged me tight and whispered about how proud she was. I tried to feel something beyond the awkwardness, but emotions don't work on command. We had dinner at an upscale restaurant where she seemed both impressed and uncomfortable with the prices. When she mentioned Dad's letter, I changed the subject. 2 weeks later, I officially opened the Judy Harper retrospective exhibition at Forgotten Frames. It was a culmination of everything, a carefully curated collection of photographs, personal items, and high-quality reproductions of Grandma's soul paintings. Bloomberg had helped me track down several buyers who agreed to loan their originals for the exhibition. The red vortex painting, on temporary loan from MOMA, held the place of honor. The gallery was packed for the opening. Art critics, collectors, social media influencers documenting everything for their followers, and several artists whose work we featured since opening. I was in the middle of discussing Grandma's technique with a curator from the Whitney when Bloomberg appeared at my elbow. "Alex, there are some people here I think you should know about," he murmured discreetly. I followed his subtle nod toward the entrance. My father stood awkwardly in his best suit, probably the same one he wore to funerals and weddings, with my mother clutching his arm. Behind them, looking surprisingly uncomfortable in business casual attire, was my brother Mark. My stomach dropped. I hadn't responded to Dad's letter, hadn't invited them to this event. Yet here they were, inserting themselves into this moment like they had every right to be part of it. They asked at the door if they could speak with you, Bloomberg explained. I can have security escort them out if you prefer. The temptation to do exactly that flickered through me, to have them removed like unwanted gatecrashers, to give them a taste of the rejection they'd served me. But something held me back. Maybe curiosity. Maybe that Midwestern politeness that never quite leaves you, even when you've adapted to New York bluntness. No, it's fine, I told Bloomberg. I'll handle it. I made my way across the crowded gallery, accepting congratulations and commentary from guests as I passed. By the time I reached my family, Dad was already holding a champagne flute from a passing server's tray and looking around with an expression of bewildered pride. There he is, Dad announced loudly as I approached. Our family genius. Got his grandmother's eye for the unusual. Several nearby guests turned to look. I forced a smile and gestured toward a quieter corner of the gallery. Dad, oblivious of the tension, continued talking as we moved. This place is something else, son. Real high-class operation you've got here. Your mom and I were just saying how we always knew you had potential. Just needed to find your thing, right? And look at you now. We reached a somewhat secluded spot near an emergency exit. I took a deep breath and finally looked my father directly in the eyes. The paintings were old, but Grandma's vision was new. I said quietly but firmly, "It's just a shame none of you could see it while she was alive." Dad's smile faltered. Mom stepped forward, her eyes pleading. "We just want things to be like they were, Alex. We're family." The audacity of that statement nearly took my breath away. Like they were before, when they'd mocked my education choices, when they'd laughed at Grandma's art, when they'd thrown me out with a hastily packed duffel bag. Mark, who'd been hanging back during this exchange, finally spoke up. "Look, we know we screwed up, but this is huge, what you're doing. We just wanted to be here for it." I looked at my brother, the golden child, the practical one, the Walmart manager who'd once suggested I sell Grandma's paintings for $1 at the flea market. Now he was standing in my gallery, surrounded by those same paintings being celebrated as masterpieces. "Are you here for me or for this?" I gestured around the gallery at the crowd, the champagne, the atmosphere of money and success. Dad misunderstood completely. "Well, we're here for you, of course. This is your big night." "My big night was when you threw me out," I replied, keeping my voice low to avoid creating a scene. "My big night was sleeping in my car in the Walmart parking lot. My big night was delivering pizzas in the snow to pay for a room with a leaky ceiling." Mom's eyes welled with tears. "We made a mistake, Alex. Parents make mistakes. This wasn't a mistake. It was a choice. You chose to throw away Grandma's art, and when I saved it, you chose to throw me away too." The conversation was interrupted by a young assistant from the gallery, informing me that a reporter from Art News wanted a statement about the exhibition. I excused myself, telling my family I'd find them later, a promise I wasn't sure I intended to keep. The remainder of the evening passed in a blur of conversations, interviews, and constant awareness of my family moving awkwardly through the crowd. Dad seemed to grow more confident with each glass of champagne, at one point loudly telling an influential collector about summer afternoons watching Judy paint, that I'm certain never happened. Mark mostly studied the price list with barely concealed shock. Mom tried to insert herself into conversations, mentioning she was Alex's mother to anyone who would listen. By the time the crowd began to thin, I was emotionally exhausted. I retreated to my office at the back of the gallery to gather my thoughts, only to find Bloomberg waiting for me there. "Complicated evening?" he asked, with the understated perception that had made him such a good mentor. I nodded, collapsing into my chair. They want to act like they were supportive all along, like they didn't throw me out, like they didn't call Grandma's paintings trash. Bloomberg considered this. People often rewrite history to make themselves the heroes of their own stories, especially when the alternative is admitting they were catastrophically wrong. So I should just let them pretend, play along with a fantasy that we're one big happy artistic family? I didn't say that, Bloomberg replied. I simply observe that reconciliation, when it happens, rarely begins with full accounting of past wrongs. It starts with small steps forward. I wasn't sure if that was wisdom or just East Coast pragmatism. Either way, I had a more immediate concern. They're still out there. What do I tell them? Whatever you need to. This is your night, your gallery, your grandmother's legacy. You get to decide who shares in it. After Bloomberg left, I sat alone in my office, staring at a cardboard storage box I brought from the climate control facility where we kept Grandma's unsold personal effects. I hadn't had time to fully sort through everything yet. Photographs, sketchbooks, miscellaneous papers. On impulse, I pulled the box closer and began rifling through it. Near the bottom, tucked inside a water-damaged sketchbook, I found an envelope. The paper had yellowed with age, the flap unsealed. Inside was a single sheet of notepaper, covered in Grandma's distinctive handwriting. My dearest Alex, if you're reading this, I'm probably gone. I've watched you grow into a thoughtful young man with an eye for beauty in unexpected places. You're the only one who ever asked about my paintings, even if you were too young to understand my answers. The world will tell you what to value, what to pursue, what success looks like. Your father does it from love, though it may not feel that way. He wants security for you because he never had it himself. But remember this, paint your own life, not what others want to see. My greatest regret was hiding my art to keep the peace. My greatest joy was creating anyway. Whatever path you choose, walk it with your eyes open to the beauty others miss. With love, always, Grandma Judy. I read the letter 3 times, my vision blurring with tears. She'd known. Somehow, she'd known I'd be the one to find her art, to see what no one else had seen. She'd left these words for me before I'd even understood what they meant. Paint your own life, not what others want to see. I folded the letter carefully and slipped it into my jacket pocket. Then I pulled out my phone and opened TikTok. The platform that had started this whole journey deserved to hear the truth. I started a live video, not with the perfect lighting and careful framing I usually use for gallery announcements, but raw and unfiltered in my office with my reddened eyes and rumpled suit. I held up Grandma's letter, explained when and how I'd found it, and then, for the first time publicly, told a complete story of being thrown out for saving her paintings. The viewers poured in 10,000, then 50,000, then over 100,000. Comments flooded the screen faster than I could read them. This is why we love you, Alex. Real talk. I'm crying right now. My family did the same when I wanted to be a musician. Are your parents still there? Blood doesn't equal family sometimes. I didn't name names or share specific conversations, but I didn't sugarcoat the abandonment either. I explained about living in my car, about the minimum wage jobs, about the loneliness of having your passion mocked by those who should support you most. And then I shared my current dilemma. My family was literally in the next room, trying to bask in the glow of success they not only fail to support, but actively try to prevent. So what do I do now? I asked the audience. They want back in my life, but I'm not sure if they want me or this. I gestured around the office, at the gallery beyond. Within minutes, #AlexVersusFamily was trending. A popular lifestyle blogger with millions of followers shared my live and posed a question. Do you owe forgiveness to family members who only want you when you're successful? The comments were overwhelmingly in my favor, with thousands of people sharing their own stories of unsupportive or conditional family love. The validation felt good, like a warm blanket wrapped around the cold parts of my heart that had never fully healed from that night on the porch with my hastily packed duffel bag. But it also felt hollow. The anonymous support of strangers couldn't fill the specific void left by my family's rejection. And despite everything, some small, stubborn part of me still wanted my parents to be proud. Not a gallery or the money or the famous connections, but of me, of the kid who'd seen value where they saw trash, who'd been right when everyone told him he was wrong. I ended a live video without resolving anything, promising my followers I'd update them later. In reality, I had no idea what I was going to do. When I finally emerged from my office, the gallery was nearly empty, just my family, standing awkwardly by the reproduction of the red vortex painting, and a few staff members discreetly clearing champagne flutes. Mom spotted me first. "There you are." We were getting worried. Dad chimed in, his voice too hearty, slightly slurred from the champagne. "Great party, son. Really showed those art snobs what the Harpers are made of." Mark just looked uncomfortable, glancing between us like he was watching a tennis match where both players had knives instead of rackets. I realized in that moment that they genuinely didn't understand. They saw my success as a vindication of our family, not as something I'd achieved despite them. In their revised narrative, they were the supportive background characters who'd always believed in me, not the antagonists who'd thrown me away when I was at my lowest. As I looked at them across the now-quiet gallery, Mom in her new dress, Dad swaying slightly in his funeral suit, Mark checking his watch and probably thinking about his morning shift at Walmart, I felt the weight of a choice pressing down on me. I could confront them with the truth, force them to acknowledge what they'd done, demand a real apology, insist on accountability. It would be justified. It might even be cathartic. Or I could accept that they would never truly understand, that in their minds, they'd already rewritten history to make themselves the heroes of the story, that the validation I craved might never come. Was forgiving them a show of strength or weakness? Would letting them back into my life be an act of compassion or self-sabotage? And most importantly, what would Grandma Judy want me to do with the life her art had made possible? I didn't answer my family that night at the gallery. Instead, I called an Uber for them to their hotel, promising we'd talk tomorrow. I needed time to process everything. The letter, the TikTok live that was still generating thousands of comments, and most importantly, what I actually wanted from this reunion. The next morning, my phone buzzed with a text from Bloomberg. "Whatever you decide, remember you're negotiating from a position of strength now." It was exactly the kind of pragmatic, slightly mercenary advice I'd come to expect from him. But he wasn't wrong. I texted my mother, suggesting we meet at a neutral location, not my gallery, not their hotel. Somewhere with no audience, no champagne, no art world pretensions. 2 days later, I found myself back in Iowa. Not Des Moines, but the small town 30 minutes outside it where Grandma Judy had lived before moving in with my parents. I'd booked flights for all of us and rented a car at the airport. My parents and Mark seemed confused by my insistence on returning to Iowa, but they'd agreed. I picked them up from their modest hotel, not out of kindness, but because I wanted to control the situation. We drove in awkward silence until I pulled into the gravel parking lot of a roadside diner called Maze. The faded sign advertised best apple pie in Iowa since 1962. "I remember this place," Mom said quietly as we walked toward the entrance. "We used to bring you kids here when we visited Judy." I nodded. Grandma always ordered the apple pie with extra ice cream. Said life was too short to skimp on dessert. The interior hadn't changed in 20 years. Cracked vinyl booths, laminated menus, coffee stain counter. We slid into a corner booth, parents on one side, Mark and me on the other. The waitress, a woman in her 60s with hair dyed an improbable shade of auburn, took our order without fanfare. For slices of apple pie. For coffees. Dad cleared his throat, ready to launch into what I assumed would be another speech about family pride and my success. I cut him off before he could start. "I didn't bring you here to talk about the gallery or the money or any of that." I said, "I brought you here because this is the last place I remember all of us being happy together with Grandma." The words hung in the air between us as the waitress delivered our pie, steam rising from the perfectly brown crusts. "I'm not going to pretend the last year didn't happen," I continued, poking at my pie without eating it. "You threw me out. You mocked my education choices, called Grandma's paintings trash, and when I tried to save them, you abandoned me." Mom's eyes welled up with tears. Dad stared at his coffee. Mark studied the tabletop, like it contained the secrets of the universe. "But I'm also not going to pretend Grandma would want to hold on to anger forever," I added. She spent decades creating beauty while being dismissed by her own family. She didn't let it stop her, and I won't either. Dad finally looked up. We're proud of what you've accomplished. Son, your mother and we were wrong about. I raised my hand to stop him. I'm not giving you back your place in my life. Not yet. Maybe not ever in the way you want. But I am giving you a chance to understand who Grandma really was. Who I am. The silence that followed was broken only by the clink of forks against plates as we all awkwardly began eating our pie. Finally, Mark spoke up. I might have gone too far with the trash can thing, he admitted, his voice uncharacteristically small. And the jokes about selling them at the flea market. Mom dabbed at her eyes with a paper napkin. We were so focused on what we thought was practical, what we thought would give you security. We never stopped to consider that we might be wrong. Dad, ever the most stubborn, finally sighed heavily. Your grandmother and I never got along. I thought her art was just a hobby to keep her busy. I couldn't see what you saw. None of us could, Mom added, but that doesn't excuse what we did. I took a bite of pie, remembering all the times Grandma and I had sat in this very booth, how she'd always give me her extra scoop of ice cream, with conspiratorial wink. I found a letter from her. I told them. She wrote it before she died, for whoever would find her paintings. She knew it would probably be me. I didn't share the contents. Some things were just for me and Grandma. She had talent, Dad admitted, real talent. I should have seen that. We finished our pie in a silence that wasn't exactly comfortable, but wasn't entirely hostile either. A tentative truce forged over apple pie and shared regret. As we left the diner, I handed each of them an envelope. Inside was an invitation to the opening of the Judy Harper Center for Arts Education, a new project I've been working on with the foundation money. The center would provide art classes and scholarships for students from rural communities like the one where Grandma had lived. This is her real legacy. I told them, not the paintings that sell for millions, but the chance for other hidden talents to be discovered and nurtured. You're welcome to attend the opening, as guests, not as my entourage. Dad nodded, understand the distinction. Mom squeezed my hand. Mark looked thoughtful, perhaps realizing for the first time that success could take forms other than a management position at Walmart. Over the next year, we established what you might call a détente. Not the warm family relationship they wanted, not the complete estrangement that might have been justified, but something in between. Dad and I spoke on the phone every few weeks. Stiff conversations about neutral topics. Mom sent care packages to my New York apartment. Mark and I exchanged occasional texts about sports teams neither of us actually followed closely. They attended the center's opening, staying in the background, making no claims to being instrumental in my success. It was the most respect they'd ever shown me. Meanwhile, the gallery flourished. We opened a second location in Chicago, focused specifically on Midwestern artists overlooked by the coastal art establishment. The foundation expanded its grants program to include arts education in rural schools across Iowa, Nebraska, and the Dakotas. One afternoon, as I sat in my office reviewing applications for the foundation's scholarship program, Bloomberg called with news. A national arts education organization wanted to honor me with their annual Young Philanthropist Award. The ceremony would be held in Washington, D.C. the following month. Who will you bring, he asked. It's quite prestigious. Good networking opportunity. I glanced at the corner of my office where I'd hung a perfect replica of Grandma's red vortex painting, the one that had started everything. The original now hung in MOMA, valued at over $2 million. But this replica, painted by a talented Iowa artist we'd helped discover, was in some ways more precious to me. No one, I replied. This one's just for me and Grandma. The day of the ceremony, I stood at the podium looking out a room full of arts patrons, educators, and administrators. I told them about a woman who painted with Elvis playing in the background, wearing a ridiculous feathered hat, about a family that couldn't see the value of what was right in front of them, about sleeping in a car and delivering pizzas, and finding a letter that changed everything. The most important thing my grandmother taught me, I concluded, was about art techniques or gallery management or even philanthropy. It was that we should paint our own lives, not what others want to see. And that true family consists of the people who see your value, even when you can't see it yourself. Later that evening, alone in my hotel room, I FaceTimed with my parents. They'd watched the live stream of the ceremony and called to congratulate me. The conversation was still awkward, still carrying the weight of our complicated past, but it was a conversation nonetheless. Today, 5 years after finding Grandma's paintings in the trash, my life bears little resemblance to the one I'd imagined for myself. The scared kid sleeping in his car has been replaced by a person with purpose, with impact, with a vision for helping others that extends far beyond myself. The gallery continues to thrive. The foundation has helped hundreds of young artists pursue their dreams. I divide my time between New York, Chicago, and a small but beautiful house I built near Grandma's hometown in Iowa. My relationship with my family remains complicated, will never be the Hallmark card version of reconciliation. Some wounds leave permanent scars. But we've found a way to move forward that honors both the pain of the past and the possibility of the future. In my home office hangs a red vortex painting. Not the original, not the replica, but a new interpretation I painted myself during a 6-month sabbatical I took to finally pursue my own artistic expression. It's not as good as Grandma's, not by a long shot, but it's mine. My own swirling emotions captured in crimson and scarlet and ruby. Sometimes, late at night when the emails stop and the phone calls end, I sit in front of it and think about how differently things might have turned out if I hadn't saved those paintings. If Bloomberg hadn't seen their value, if I hadn't found Grandma's letter. But mostly, I think about Grandma Judy in her ridiculous feathered hat, dancing Elvis while creating beauty that no one around her could see. And I smile, knowing that she taught me the most valuable lesson of all. True family sees your worth, even when the rest of the world, and sometimes even you yourself, cannot.